I mean, it's been highly controversial that Lucy Letby has been able to refuse to come up to the dock, not only to face the families of those victims, to hear those highly emotional impact statements, but also to avoid looking Justice Goss in the eye as he sentenced her this afternoon. Now, Lucy Letby will spend life in prison, but a lot of people still perhaps may think that's not enough, and that she may be provided with these statements. Of course, it's doubtful that she will actually read them, but it's perhaps almost the next step for the families now is that they can imagine that the best case scenario is that she's been provided these statements and that at some point she will read them and she will understand the hurts that she has caused them.
And those babies, Sophie, it was 5 boys and 2 girls killed by Lucy Letby. 2 of the boys were brothers from triplets, and Lucy Letby was one of the last to hold them. She even dressed him after he died. I mean, what dreadful, dreadful thing for that baby's parents to have to live with.
Just unimaginable pain, I imagine, that those families have experienced. You mentioned the 2 boys who were part of a set of triplets. We heard statements from their parents, both the mother and father. They were pre-recorded statements that were filmed and they were played out in the court because both parents simply felt they would be unable to cope reading them out in person. The father of those 2 boys, child O and child P, he said that at one point he considered taking his own life. He was so distraught that he'd hit rock bottom. He said, "Lucy Letby has destroyed our lives. The anger and hatred I have for her will never go away. It has destroyed me as a man and as a father." And I think that really encapsulates the feeling of a lot of those parents who are sitting in court today to hear that sentencing, that she has effectively ruined a lot of their lives, and this is pain that they will now have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And although Lucy Letby will now die in prison, it's really just a consequence at this point. They will still have to suffer with the fact that either Lucy Letby attempted to murder or did in fact murder their babies.
Now, one of the processes, Sophie, that they may find some sort of answers is the inquiry that will now take place with the court case having concluded. And Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, saying he wanted that to happen as quickly as possible. But there are questions now as well that this should be something that is judge-led and statutory, where people are called to give their evidence and they have to give that evidence on oath. That is a longer process. I mean, have you had any indication from the families that you've spoken to as to how they believe this should now be taken forward?
I think at this point, Mark, the families are really just trying to process what they've been hearing, not only over the last 10 months, but specifically the last few weeks, of course, as we've been hearing those verdicts come in dribs and drabs. We've been unable to report them until last Friday, And at that point, as they've been coming in, of course, each parent and each family have been having to process that. So I think at this point, many of them, they're unable to comment on exactly how they're feeling it and exactly what is to come in the future.
In the last few moments, Sophie, we're hearing that Justice Goss has thanked the jury for their outstanding diligence and acknowledged that the trial will have a very emotional impact, also telling them that there is support available, which underlines how difficult this trial has been for the families, the victims' families, but also the jurors themselves, having to listen to huge swathes of evidence over 9 or 10 months.
Well, I think a great example of their diligence is exactly how long they spent on their deliberations. Of course, there were 22 charges on the indictment, so we always knew that there was going to be a significant period of time they would take to come to their verdicts. But they spent over 100 hours in that deliberating room trying to come to verdicts. We got 3 unanimous verdicts, and then the rest were on the majority direction. There were 6 that were left as hung because because they were unable to come to that verdict. But they spent as much time as possible, and it was only when the judge asked if given more time would they be able to come to more verdicts that they then did concede, and they were dismissed on those final 6. But they were able to come on 14 of those verdicts, 16 if you include the 2 not guilty verdicts. So I think it's a testament to their diligence over the past 10 months. Of course, the evidence, some of it has been quite graphic, and in other places very harrowing, hearing the evidence given by many members of the families.